Buyer's agents are going to have to work for free. No, they're not. And broker compensation car form just dropped. So if you're a California real estate agent, this is a must see for you. I'm going to show you real quick. They've actually made a lot of changes that are really, really helpful. Now, just a disclaimer, I am just a real estate agent, coach, and investor. I am not a trainer. I'm not a forms expert. I'm just going through this based on having read through it and understanding it to the best of my abilities. So I'm going to explain that to you. So we're going to go through this, and I'm going to go through pretty quickly because remember, it's your job to make sure that you are reading every single line of this. So let's jump in. First and foremost, what you're going to see is that when we first start, this is actually a bundle of forms. So the very first form you see is not going to be the BRBC. It's going to be the CAR form AD, the relationship, the agency relationship disclosure. And so what we'll see is this is actually the first place where we're going to start filling things out. Now, one thing to note is that what you are going to want to do, and what I would highly recommend, is to go and fill some of this out in your templates. So when you fill things out in your templates, it's going to automatically add to some of these lines. So you want to make sure you have that just to make this much easier on you in the future. But for now, we're just going to fill it out from scratch. So we're going to talk about our buyer. So we're going to check this box and we're going to say buyer Bob. Okay, then he's just going to be buying by himself. Then we want to fill out our real estate broker firm. Mine is Keller Williams, West Ventura County. I'm just going to put brokerage, buyer brokerage in here. Then you're going to put your brokerage DRE number. So, then you're going to put your information, and of course you want to write all of this out. Then we're going to fill out the agent DRE number. And of course, if you don't have this information, you can get all of this information from your brokerage. So we're going to keep going. And right here already, the next page is the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement, the BRBC. So what we want to make sure is we want to make sure that we put a date, the date that it's prepared, because remember, the date that it's prepared is different from the date that it's signed. The date that it's signed is actually the date that it's active, but we're putting the date that it's prepared. So you'll see that it already pulls all of this information. Buyer Bob is pulled from what we had written before. The buyer brokerage, remember, you're going to put in your brokerage, Keller Williams, West Ventura County, whatever your brokerage is. And then what we'll see is this is a grid, just like the grid in the RPA that we're already used to, just like the grid that's coming in the RLA. So it actually makes it really, really easy. And you guys are going to love this. We're going to love this once we really start using it. So first and foremost, remember on the side of this is where it's going to explain the paragraphs. So we're just going to fill all this out. If we need further explanation, it's going to be in the paragraphs below. So the explanation for the type of representation is in paragraph 4B. So if we go down to paragraph 4B, here is that broker right to compensation, and it's going to be a description of it. So if you have any questions, be sure to refer down to this. If your client has any questions, be sure to refer them down there. So for now, let's just jump in and get started. So the representation period. So we're going to say that the representation period starts today, but look, it says not to exceed 3 months. Now, if you saw my last video, I was like, why do they have this? This wasn't part of the litigation. I found out why. It's because, and actually I had heard this, but I forgot about it. It's because there was a naughty brokerage in Florida or something who was taking advantage of elderly people, and they were actually getting into listing agreements and putting a lien on the house because they would say that they had a listing agreement for like 60 years or something like that. And then they would put a lien on the house if they didn't use them for the sale of the property. So that's why this is saying it's not to exceed 3 months. I think 3 months is a little short because basically now we're going to just have to extend it, but whatever, we can do it. There's a modification of terms. There's all kinds of stuff. So we're going to set this for 3 months, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to do it for the 25th. Normally, I like to say the last day of the month just so that we have all of this in, but since it can't exceed 3 months, we don't want to be in violation of our contract. Now, the type of representation defaults to non-exclusive, but I don't know about you. I want an exclusive representation for my clients. Now, I might do a non-exclusive if it's like somebody who I just met and they're hesitant. I can say, listen, we can do a non-exclusive agreement for 7 days or for these few properties or whatever. And there are documents that you can fill out that are for that exact purpose. But in general, this regular BRBC, I'm going to always default to exclusive. So this is something that I would change in my templates. Then we have a property type. It defaults to single family. So I'm going to leave that. Location. So if you're anywhere like me, I want to make sure I'm kind of on the border of a bunch of different counties. And so I want to make sure that all of those counties are represented. So I'm going to put Ventura County, Los Angeles County, and Santa Barbara County. And if you work in more than that, you can just list it out. The idea here is that you don't want somebody driving 20 minutes and be in a totally different county and them saying, oh, well, we didn't sign anything, so I didn't think you worked out there. I want people to know, yes, I can still help you. I want to make sure that I'm helping you regardless of where you go. Additional description, additional buyer preferences and priorities. This would be if the example that I've heard used is like somebody is like deathly allergic to mold. And so they're saying, I cannot buy something that has mold in it. So this form is not necessarily going to go anywhere. It's really just for your own knowledge and purposes to remember we're not going to do anything with mold, or if they tell you I'm allergic to, popcorn ceilings and things like that. We're just going to have it on file for our own needs. Also, side note, we're in the middle of moving. So when you see this mess behind me, that's why. I always forget to mention it because I don't think about it until I see it in the background. Okay, then we have properties excluded from representation, which would be, for example, if they had another exclusive agreement with somebody else or a non-exclusive agreement, but it was for specific properties, they might tell you, I can't do it on those properties. So this is just asking them, do you have any properties that you've seen with another agent that might fall under their purview? Because if it is, you can't help them on that transaction. You could, but you're not going to get paid. So you want to make sure that you know that at the beginning. Then we talk about the amount of compensation here. So the amount of compensation is whatever you determine it to be. And you can set a minimum rate for your own compensation. That's okay. But I am not going to determine that for you. Nobody can determine that for you. That was part of the lawsuit and all this mess, is that there was like price fixing and things like that. So there is no price fixing. You determine your rate that you're going to have. So you say your amount of compensation, like my office, there's like an admin fee, so you can add that on, or you can just say it's the percentage or whatever you want to do. This is totally up to you, but this is where you have that conversation about compensation. And then we say the continuation period. The continuation period shall be however many calendar days after the representation period or any extension continuation period. So it would be, let's just say 30 calendar days after the representation period. And the reason for this is exactly what we were talking about. If you've shown them a list of properties, then you have 30 days from the time it's severed or canceled or whatever to be able to still, if they say, well, I don't want to use you, I want to use the agent on that property because they're saying that they could give me a discount, they don't have the right to just cancel with you and go work with them on that particular property. So you have to get them a list of properties and all of that kind of stuff, yada, yada, but that's what this would be for. Cancellation. So cancellation, remember, can be canceled by either party at any time for any reason. A non-exclusive cancellation would be effective upon receipt, or an exclusive cancellation would be effective 30 days after receipt. So if you have an exclusive, which remember we already marked it as exclusive, if you have an exclusive representation, then it defaults to 30 days after receipt. Now let's back up here real quick. Payments received by broker from seller or others. If broker receives compensation from seller or others for broker representation of buyer, the amount shall be credited against buyer's obligation to pay the broker. Broker shall not receive any amount in excess of paragraph 2E1, which is this one. Okay, so I've been hearing misinformation going around left and right about people being very, very confused about this. So brokerages are coming out and saying that no longer will they do broker to broker payments. So no longer will it be the listing broker pays the buyer's broker. No. What happens now is that the entire obligation to pay the buyer's agent is on the buyer. And so what this is saying is if the broker receives compensation, maybe by way of a seller credit, the seller credit is going to pay for the buyer's obligation. So this sentence is basically saying that the buyer understands and agrees that the broker can take that compensation directly from the seller credit. But the seller is crediting the buyer and the buyer is using it to pay their obligation. So it's totally separate now. The buyer pays the buyer's agent, the seller pays the seller's agent. However, the seller is able to offer credits and then the buyer determines what that credit is used for. And in this case, the buyer is saying, I agree and I accept and I acknowledge that if I get a credit, it's going to be used to pay my buyer's agent. So this is where the confusion is coming in. People are saying, well, buyer's agents are going to have to work for free. No, they're not. That is not what this is saying. This is just saying they're no longer going to do broker to broker compensation. It's going to be the seller to buyer, and the buyer has to pay their own compensation. I hope you're tracking with me. I hope that made sense. All right, let's keep going here. So, this is another really good conversation to have. Time to deliver buyer personal financial information. So the default is within 5 days. And the reality here is that we're now saying, okay, buyer, you have to pay this buyer compensation. And it may be that we can get that from the seller, but it might not be. So if we can't get it from the seller, do you, buyer Bob, have the money to pay me, the agent? If they do, they need to provide funds for that. And they need to basically show us their financials via proof of funds in whatever way they want. But they need to show us proof of funds within 5 days. That's what this is asking for. Now, if they cannot pay the buyer broker, if they don't have sufficient funds to pay the broker, or the buyer intends to purchase with a loan product that does not allow the buyer to pay compensation to the broker. Remember, this is VA loans used to not allow the buyer to pay the buyer compensation. But already they've amended that and they're changing that. So it's a temporary fix, but I anticipate that that's coming in the future. But anyway, in whatever case, it's a really good conversation to have. And it's good to have this on here so that we can have this conversation so that everybody's on the same page. All right, now that's the end of our grid. And so the reality is we're done filling stuff out. That was pretty easy. So when we're talking to our client, we're really telling them, here's the main information. Here's the meat and potatoes of it. And then as we go down, these are just all the explanations of what's above. So we can see here that we have some signature lines, broker compensation. Again, this is just acknowledging that if the buyer gets money from the seller or whatever, they're able to pay the broker and the broker is eligible for compensation. All right, so now here we have information that we need to fill out again. It pulled it from the top, so we're good here. We don't need to fill out any more information. Because this is the BRBC, you likely don't have a property identified, so you're not going to have seller information. So this is all going to stay blank, and it's going to be signed once you're under contract with somebody. And that is the end. See, quick and easy. I told you, once you get used to this, it's going to be so easy and you're going to love it. Just like the RPA is so much easier to fill out, this one is so much easier. And once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to fill it out in 3 minutes and you'll be able to explain it even faster. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you get more videos just like this as soon as they come out, and we'll see you in the next video.